Hey, this is the Merg again. Welcome back for another episode. Today we're going to talk about the evolutionary tree. Have you ever wanted to create those family trees when you were really young and you tried to gather as much information as you could as far back as you could by asking your grandparents who their parents were and then wondering who their parents were? Well, this evolutionary tree isn't much different from that. It's based on the assumption that we all come from this one living entity that existed at the beginning of life itself. With the understanding of the theory of evolution and natural selection, you can imagine scientists were very curious about tracing back the steps to our ancestors. Creating the evolutionary tree, a tree of life, allowed us to visualize this concept. To understand the differences, we had to look deep into the molecular level to find out if there were any evolutionary connections these different species may have had in common. A scientist named Carl Woese studied the science of phylogeny, otherwise known as the genealogical relationship of all organisms. What's the difference between phylogeny and genealogy? Phylogeny reveals evolutionary relationships, while genealogy reveals family history or lineage. Woese's prime focus was on RNA, only because at the time we didn't have the tools to study DNA. Decades later, when the technology was sufficient, DNA became the standard. The reason DNA works so well was because the sequences in DNA can change over the course of evolution, and that's something, if studied, should lead us to compare DNA of one organism to another, looking for commonalities in their DNA sequences and building blocks. If you recall from the previous video on the 5 characteristics of life and 3 theories in biology, I mentioned that DNA had letters and that these letters lined up in sequences. Closely related organisms had DNA that closely matched letter by letter. Scientists would build upon these huge diagrams based on the similarities and differences of DNA, mapping these species back throughout history. Branches that share the same stem are considered closely related, while those that don't are likely more distant. The closer in proximity that these branches are, the more chances they are cousin species. Now, this tree is constructed in a way to look like an actual tree, leaving behind the likelihood that the main trunk is where all the branches came from and that what we would call the common ancestor of all organisms. Directly from this single trunk grew a few major branches that further led on to the branches of each species. At first, we thought there were only 2 major branches, this being the prokaryotes and the eukaryotes. But then later it was discovered that the archaea was also a major branch that separated from the beginning of the eukaryote branch. That makes a total of 3 domains that rooted from the very first ancestor, being bacteria, archaea, and eukarya. Eukaryotes have a nucleus and are oftentimes found to be multicellular, while prokaryotes, which consist of bacterial and archaeal cells, usually don't have a nucleus and are often single-celled. The study on phylogenetics created several surprising discoveries along the road. Take, for example, fungi, which was once thought to be related to plants. Now, it turns out that they're more related to animals. Go ahead and ask a person who is a vegan if he or she knew this. The tree isn't completed yet, and once again, the arrangement of the branches are highly debatable. Scientists are currently also trying to classify and name these different groups, but for now, just know that the 3 main branches of the tree are bacteria, archaea, and eukarya. These 3 are referred to as domains, and any branches that come from these domains are considered major branches known as phylum. We do, however, have a naming scheme for species in place, invented by the scientist named Carolus Linnaeus, known as a scientific name, as a 2-part naming system, first being genus, which makes up closely related groups. Humans, for example, are the genus Homo, and then there's species, which are, well, the species of an organism. For example, humans are considered sapiens. Hope you liked the video. If you have any questions, just comment below, and if I see it, I'll most definitely reply. If you like it, go ahead and press the like button, then smash the subscribe button and share.